Have you ever known the right answer to something but chose not to say it in fear of judgment of the people around you? Do you want to know why you do this? It's something called conformity. Now you might be wondering, what even is conformity? Well, let's look at the first person who did a study on conformity. His name was Edward L. Thorndike. Now, in Edward's study, he would take participants and ask them their opinion on a topic. The participant would later then be confronted with either an authority figure or a group of people who had the opposite opinion of that participant. Later on, that participant was then asked their opinion on the topic again. Majority of the time, the participant would change their opinion about the topic to agree with either the authority figure or the group, depending on which one they were presented with. Now, this was very strange because the authority figure and the group didn't have supporting evidence for their opposing opinion. You might be wondering, why do the participants choose to do this? Well, a psychologist named Solomon Asch was very curious about this as well. Asch focused on three main questions. Why do we conform to others instead of standing strong in our own beliefs? Why do we abandon our firmly held convictions and bring our attitudes and judgments in line with others, even when we know we're right? And why do you change your views without supporting evidence? He did this in his known line study. Let's get into it. In this study, there was one participant in a room full of Confederates. The group of people was shown two different cards, one with a singular line on it and a different card with 3 lines on it. The participants were asked to say which line best compared to the card with only 1 line on it. The first couple of rounds, everyone agreed on the correct answer. Slowly, the Confederates started saying the wrong answer on purpose. Eventually, this made the participant question whether their answer was correct or not. As the study went on, researchers noticed physical, nonverbal changes in the participants, including fidgeting, perplexed looks, and even sometimes standing to try and get a better look at the cards. During the study, Asch had some normal groups where there was only participants and no Confederates. In these groups, he found that participants would make mistakes less than 1% of the time. He also found that participants in groups with Confederates would conform to the group 36.8% of the time. This study led to the finding of normative influence. Normative influence is how the fear of standing out as different motivates people to conform to groups. Now let's go over some follow-up studies. In one study Asch did, he put one Confederate in a group of participants. When the Confederate would say the wrong answer and the group of participants would say the right answer, the Confederate openly and loudly got ridiculed by the rest of the group. In a different follow-up by Morton and Harold, they chose to do something very similar to what Solomon Asch did in his original study. There was still one participant in a group full of Confederates, and the participant witnessed the incorrect responses from the Confederate, except this time the participant was allowed to record their answer privately. Participants being allowed to record their answer privately took away the fear of being ridiculed for their wrong answer. This removes the power of normative influence. Removing this power of normative influence dropped the rate of conformity dramatically, but for some reason, it still wasn't at 0%. This is because of something called informative influence. This is being able to be convinced of something by others. Later on, Solomon Asch was curious on if the amount of people affected the likelihood to conform. He found that the amount of people affected the rate of conformity up until a certain point. Another interesting find of Asch's studies is that when there was another person in the group who didn't conform, whether that be a participant or a Confederate, the rate of conformity went down. This because that gave participants a sense of comfort, knowing they were not the only odd one out from the rest of the group. Now, why are these studies so important? It actually relates to Nazis. I know, crazy, right? But it relates to more common things as well, like beauty standards and crowd violence. Now let's take a look at the 2 more relatable ones. For beauty standards, it's hard for people to not go along with the society norm of thinness, which can lead to eating disorders. For crowd violence, it is known that people suffer under peer pressure, making them more likely to conform to the group and do what everyone else is doing. When thinking about individuals in a crowd, a researcher named Gustav Le Brun claimed that an individual in a crowd is just a grain of sand amongst other grains of sand that can be stirred up easily. When you think about conformity in this way, it's seen as irrational influence. This can lead people to conform in a mindless type manner. Conformity is such a weird thing to think about. Like, why do we agree with others when we know they're in the wrong and we're on the right? How does that make sense? So strange. Let's think back to Ash's original study. When the study was over, discussing results with participants, asking them why they gave the wrong answer if they knew it was wrong, many participants claimed that they didn't want to mess up the study results, hence why they decided to conform with the group instead of saying what they truly believed. Some people claim that Ash's studies on conformity was the most dramatic illustration of conformity, explaining how we just blindly follow a group, even when we know that our actions don't relate to the truth. If you're thinking about all the times you've conformed to a group, don't feel bad. It's totally normal. Conforming to a group isn't always as bad as it seems, like conforming with Nazis. Conformity explains why we choose to do certain things in social settings. So next time you fall victim to peer pressure, don't feel too bad. It's a lot more common than you think it is. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this informational video about conformity. Peace out, guys.